Bonjour à tous. Aujourd'hui, nous avons deux leçons. Première leçon, savoir et connaître de nouveaux verbes. Partie 2, les pronoms i et on. Commençons avec les verbes savoir et connaître. So we're starting off with the verbs savoir and connaître. Let's start with the verb avoir. Savoir. The verb savoir. Voici la conjugaison. Je sais, S-A-I-S. Tu sais, S-A-I-S. Il, elle ou on sait, S-A-I-T. Nous savons, S-A-V-O-N-S. Vous savez, S-A-V-E-Z. Ils ou elles savent, S-A-V-E-N-T. So go ahead and pause it, and once you've had a time to note down the conjugation, we'll continue. Voila, welcome back. So I showed you the conjugation in the present tense. Let's look at the past tense. So our past participle for savoir is going to be su. So j'ai su qu'il y avait une fête. I found out there was a party. Good news about savoir, it's regular in the imparfait. So you take the new form of the verb, nous savons, you drop the ONS, so it's S-A-V, and then you add your regular imparfait endings. Je savais, S-A-V-A-I-S, qu'il y avait une fête. So look at these two translations. J'ai su qu'il y avait une fête. I found out there was a party. Versus je savais qu'il y avait une fête. I knew there was a party. So if you're using the passé composé, remember with the passé composé, you're talking about what changed in a situation. So j'ai su means I found out. So if you use savoir in the passé composé, it means I found out something. So nous avons su qu'il était en retard. We found out that he was running late. Whereas the imparfait you use to talk about how things were. So I knew there was a party. This was an ongoing condition, my knowledge of this party. Je savais qu'il y avait une fête. So when do you use the verb savoir? So both savoir and connaître sort of translate to the verb to know in English, but there are specific situations when you use the verb savoir. For example, savoir, you can use it to mean to know how to do something. So for example, je sais parler français. I know how to speak French. Je sais parler français. Nous savons faire la vaisselle. We know how to wash the dishes. Nous savons faire la vaisselle. Adele et Beyoncé savent chanter. So Adele and Beyoncé know how to sing. Adele et Beyoncé savent chanter. You can also use savoir to say that you know a fact or a very specific piece of information. So for example, regardons l'image. Les élèves savent la réponse. They know the answer. It's a very specific piece of information. They know it. Est-ce que tu sais le théorème de Pythagore? Do you know Pythagorean theorem? Savez-vous le nombre d'étudiants dans la classe? Do you know the number of students in the class? Savez-vous le nombre d'étudiants dans la classe? So, la réponse, le théorème de Pythagore, and le nombre d'étudiants dans la classe, those are all specific pieces of information. So you use savoir to talk about knowing these specific pieces of information. A lot of times you'll see the verb savoir followed by question words. So you'll see it followed by que, meaning what or that, qui, meaning who, où, with a little accent, meaning where, quand, means when, comment, meaning how, or pourquoi, meaning why. So the verb savoir will be followed by these question words a lot of the time. So for example, nous savons que tu arrives mardi. We know that you're arriving on Tuesday. Ils savent comment aller à la gare. They know how to get to the train station. Je sais où je vais. I know where I'm going. Tu sais qui a fait la lessive? Do you know who did the laundry? So when you're using these question words, you're saying that you know the answer to that question. What, who, where, when, how, or why. So that's the verb savoir. Let's talk about the verb connaître. First, let's look at the conjugation. Je connais, C-O-N-N-A-I-S. Tu connais, C-O-N-N-A-I-S. Il, elle ou on connaît, C-O-N-N-A-I. Accent circonflexe, T. So the reason this one has a circumflex is because it's not followed by an S. And what that means is that back in the day there would have been an S there, but they stopped using it, so they just left this accent here. It's sort of a memorial to the S that once followed this I, but is no longer there. So R-I-P-S. We'll just have connaît, accent circonflexe, T. Continuons. Nous connaissons, C-O-N-N-A-I-S-S-O-N-S. Vous connaissez, C-O-N-N-A-I-S-S-O-Z. Il ou elle connaissent, C-O-N-N-A-I-S-S-E-N-T. So go ahead and pause the video, make sure that you've had a minute to jot this conjugation down, and we'll continue. So the past participle of connaître is connu. So once again, there's a difference. If you're using the passé composé or the imparfait, the meaning is going to be different depending on which form of the verb you use. So if you use connaître in the passé composé, it means met for the first time. So nous avons connu son père. We met his father. If you use connaître in the imparfait, it means we knew. This was an acquaintance of long standing. Nous connaissions son père. We knew his father. So nous avons connu is we met. Nous connaissions, imparfait, is we knew. And while we're here, the verb reconnaître is similar to connaître. It follows the same conjugation patterns, and it means to recognize. Mes profs de lycée ne me reconnaissent... Sorry, I read that wrong. Mes profs de lycée me reconnaissent encore. My high school teachers still recognize me. Nous avons reconnu vos enfants à la soirée. We recognized your children at the party. So when do you use connaître? So with savoir, we were talking about specific facts or how to do something. Connaître is more to be familiar with a person, a place, or a thing. So, for example, people. Paul connaît Ringo. A person isn't just a single fact that you can know and fully encapsulate in your brain. People are vastly complicated beings with depths you can never truly sound. So, we're going to use connaître when we talk about knowing people. Paul connaît Ringo is Paul knows Ringo. Nous connaissons Wilmington. We know Wilmington. This probably means like we know our way around Wilmington or we're familiar with Wilmington. So we're not talking about a single fact here. We're talking about a whole city. So nous connaissons Wilmington. Another example, normalement, les Américains ne connaissent pas bien le cinéma français. Normally, Americans do not know French cinema very well. Or Americans are not very familiar with French cinema. So we've learned the verbs savoir et connaître. Pratiquons un tout petit peu avec notre classe Canvas, partie 1. So here you're going to upload a file today and you're going to answer these 3 questions first. Nommez 2 choses que vous savez faire. So you're going to start out your sentence with je sais and then list 2 things that you know how to do. So for example, if I were to say it, I would say je sais parler français et chanter. Numéro 2, nommez une personne que vous aimeriez connaître. So for example, moi, j'aimerais connaître J'aimerais connaître Audrey Tautou. She's a French actress. Et finalement, est-ce que vous connaissez des artistes, auteurs ou musiciens français? Lesquels? So your answer is going to be either oui, je connais. And so it doesn't necessarily mean you know this person personally, but you're familiar with their work. So moi, je connais Balzac. I've never actually met Balzac. He's been dead even longer than I've been alive. So, but I've read his work. Oui, je connais Balzac. If you don't know any French artists or authors or musicians, you would say non, je n'en connais pas. And I will accept francophone artists, so Canadians, Timothy Chalamet, etc. Okay, continuons. Voilà notre classe Canvas partie 1. I'm going to let you pause and take a minute to either do the classe Canvas activity or jot it down, and then we'll continue with the lesson. Voilà. Continuons avec la leçon et nous avons les pronoms I et on. So we're learning two brand new pronouns. So let's just briefly review the pronouns we've already learned in this class. So we've already learned direct object pronouns, objet direct, me, te, le, la, et l'apostrophe, nous, vous, and les. And these pronouns can replace a direct object in a sentence. So whatever the direct object of the sentence is, you can use one of these pronouns instead of that as a way to avoid repetition. We've also learned objet indirect replaces an indirect object. Me, te, lui, nous, vous, and leur. So you would use one of these pronouns instead of the indirect object of the sentence. Let's look at an example. So, j'ai donné le cadeau à ma mère. So, le cadeau is our direct object. And so we would replace it with le. And à ma mère is the indirect object. So we would replace it with lui. Je le lui ai donné. And we put our pronouns before the conjugated verb unless there's an infinitive in the sentence. And there's no infinitive in this sentence, so we put it in front of the conjugated verb avoir. Je le lui ai donné. Voilà. So these are the pronouns we've already learned. Today we're starting with some brand new ones. Let's start with I, le pronom I. So like any other pronoun, you use it to replace something. And what I love about I and on is you use them to replace entire phrases. Like imagine you can replace an entire phrase with just one letter, the pronoun I. So the pronoun I replaces a phrase beginning with the prepositions à, chez, dans, en, or sur. You'll most often see it with à. And it's usually associated with places. So let's look at an example. Voici la ville de Montpellier. J'ai passé un an à Montpellier. So here's the city of Montpellier. I spent a year in Montpellier. So you notice Montpellier is repeated. And so here we have the prepositional phrase à Montpellier. So what we can do is we can replace it with the pronoun I. So now we have j'y ai passé un an. So we replaced it with the pronoun I and put it in front of the conjugated verb. J'y ai passé un an. Je n'y suis pas resté. I didn't stay there. Parce que je devais finir mes études. Because I had to finish my studies. Je veux y retourner un jour. So here we have an infinitive, so the I is going to go in front of the infinitive. Je veux y retourner un jour. I want to return there one day. So that was the pronoun I. Let's look at the pronoun on. So you use the pronoun on to replace a phrase beginning with de, or an expression of quantity, or an indefinite article. You'll most often see it with de. So let's look at an example. Je voudrais du sucre. So we're going to replace du sucre, because it starts with de, with on. So instead of je voudrais du sucre, we could say j'en voudrais. En is replacing du sucre. Let's look at another example. Nous avons besoin de silence. So here we have an expression starting with de. Nous avons besoin de silence. So we would replace de silence with en. Nous en avons besoin. We have need of it. Nous en avons besoin. And finally, Anya a peur des lapins. So des lapins, it starts with de. It's the phrase starting with de, so we're going to replace it with en. Elle en a peur. She is afraid of them. You can also use en to replace nouns following numbers or expressions of quantity. So when using en in this way, you retain the quantity so that it's clear what you're talking about. So for example, if we were trying to say il a trois frères et sœurs, we could replace frères et sœurs with en, and we would keep trois at the end. Il en a trois. He has three of them. If we said il en a, it would just mean he has some of them. But here, because we kept trois at the end, we know he has three of them. Il en a trois. Let's look at another example. C'est difficile de trouver un appartement. So, un appartement is an indefinite article. Let's look at this next sentence. Nous en avions visité. Nous en avons visité plusieurs. So plusieurs means several. So we visited several of them. Nous en avons visité plusieurs, mais ils étaient trop chers. But they were really expensive. Mais c'était très cher. Voilà. So you can use en with expressions of quantity. And with e and en, you're going to use the same placement rules you would with other pronouns. So, du sucre, j'en voudrais bien, merci. So, en goes in front of the conjugated verb. So normally your pronoun is going to go in front of the conjugated verb unless there's an infinitive. So here, on se retrouve à la fac. On y va souvent. Should we meet at the campus, we often go there. So, y goes before the conjugated verb va. On y va souvent. J'adore ce fromage. I love this cheese. Est-ce que tu en as déjà goûté? Have you already tasted it? So, en goes in front of the conjugated verb a, which should have an S in front of it. So, let's see here. Bad teacher. Mauvais professeur de français. Tu en as déjà goûté? So, again, in front of the conjugated verb. Nous voulons aller au nouveau restaurant. Nous n'y avons pas encore mangé. So here you have a ne and a pas. It's negative. So your pronoun y is going to stick with avant. We haven't eaten there yet. Nous n'y avons pas encore mangé. Il y reste de la soupe. There's still soup. So here y is in front of reste. Voulez-vous en manger? So here we have an infinitive, manger. So en is going to go in front of manger. And one last example, Laurie ne peut pas se détendre au bureau. Laurie can't relax at the office. Elle doit y travailler. So here we have the infinitive travailler, to work. Elle doit y travailler. She has to work there. So y goes in front of the infinitive travailler. Elle doit y travailler. And one thing you're going to watch out for is the expression il y en a. Il y en a is an expression that's used a lot, and you notice it has I and en. Il y en a. And it means there is some or there are some of something. Du pain, il y en a à la boulangerie. Bread, it's at the boulangerie. De l'aspirine, il y en a à la pharmacie. Aspirin, there is some at the pharmacy. Voilà. Pratiquons un tout petit peu et regardons notre classe Canvas, partie 2. So I have 2 questions here. 2 questions. Où est-ce que tu veux aller dans le monde? So where do you want to go in the world? And we're going to pretend that money and logistics are no object. So anywhere. Qu'est-ce que tu veux y faire? What do you want to do there? So you're going to say je veux aller, and then you're going to have your preposition depending on where it is, and then the place. And then you're going to say je veux y, and you're going to mention the activities you want to do there. Here's an example. Moi, je veux aller en Guadeloupe. Je veux y nager et bronzer. Deuxième question. Combien de frères et de sœurs as-tu? So you're going to say j'en ai, followed by the number of brothers and sisters that you have. Or je n'en ai pas, meaning I don't have any. So, moi, j'en ai un. I say j'en ai un because I only have one brother. Voilà. Voilà les verbes savoir et connaître et les pronoms i et on. Bon courage et à la prochaine.